What if two of the deadliest beings from another reality suddenly fell into the galaxy of endless war, a place where hope is a faint memory and every world bleeds under the Emperor's gaze? What would happen if unstoppable rage and unyielding ferocity arrived in a universe already drenched in blood, where men fight, die, and are forgotten within moments, and only the strongest, or the most cunning, survive? Imagine a world where even the mightiest space marines hesitate, where titans tremble before raw strength, and the warp itself recoils at the presence of forces it cannot comprehend. This is not a hypothetical. This is Varkal Prime, a forsaken world on the edge of Imperial space, where the air tastes of ash and despair, and the ground is scorched from centuries of unending conflict. The Valyrian 7th Regiment, a disciplined yet weary contingent of the Imperial Guard, had spent decades defending the barren plains, mountains, and ancient ruins of this outpost against the relentless incursions of Chaos cults, Xenos raiders, and the occasional warps, Bond terror. They were soldiers trained for survival, yet none could have prepared for what was about to fall from the sky. It began subtly, as all disasters do. Psychers stationed in orbit detected irregularities in the warp, flickers of energy that did not correspond to known phenomena. Communications with nearby sectors reported anomalies. Entire comms arrays died without reason, and Voidcraft veered off course, as if the universe itself were bending under pressure. On the surface, Lieutenant Caius of the Valyrian 7th noticed a strange shimmer along the horizon, a distortion of air and light that made the mountains seem to breathe. His instincts screamed danger, yet he could not articulate the scope of the threat. And then the sky split. Not a meteor, not a demonic incursion, but a rift, a jagged tear in reality, glowing with a violent swirl of green and violet light. From this rift fell two figures, one a hulking mass of muscle and rage, green-skinned and eyes burning with uncontrolled fury, the other a smaller, lethal form, moving with silent precision, claws glinting like silver in the dying light. Hulk and Wolverine had arrived not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as forces of nature beyond comprehension. The first contact was catastrophic. The Valyrian 7th fired everything they had. Las guns, autocannons, and heavy bolters erupted in futile defiance. Hulk roared, and the ground shook with each step. Entire defensive emplacements were obliterated under his fists, turning prepared positions into smoking rubble. Wolverine moved like a shadow through the chaos, striking with surgical lethality, cutting down the first wave of Chaos cultists who had dared to ambush the Imperial forces. His claws sliced through armor and flesh alike, leaving no survivors. Confusion and terror rippled through the ranks. Guardsmen had faced horrors before, but never had they confronted entities so powerful and alien. Even seasoned officers felt the weight of helplessness pressing down. Lieutenant Caius barked orders, but every command seemed meaningless in the face of unstoppable might and unerring skill. The first wave of resistance crumbled within minutes, leaving the survivors staring at the impossible spectacle. Hulk, an avatar of raw, unbridled rage, and Wolverine, a predator whose precision made him nearly untouchable. The battle did not stop with the first clash. Across the plains, rumors began to spread among both Imperial and Chaos forces. The strangers were not servants of the warp, yet they defied its rules. Hulk's rage carved rivers of destruction through the battlefield, while Wolverine stalked with unerring patience, eliminating the most dangerous threats first. Within hours, Varkal Prime had become a crucible of war unlike any other, a testing ground for forces beyond mortal comprehension. Orbiting the planet, psychers and navigators aboard Imperial vessels strained to understand the anomaly. Their minds burned with visions of raw, chaotic power, and even their most disciplined faculties failed to fully grasp the truth. Hulk and Wolverine were not of this universe, and their presence threatened to shatter the fragile order of the 41st millennium. Across the sector, high-ranking commanders and inquisitors debated whether this was a warp-born weapon, a Xenos experiment, or something entirely different. None could agree, and none could hope to stop what was coming. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the devastation became apparent. Entire regiments had been decimated, the landscape reshaped by immense force, and the cries of the fallen echoed across the plains. Hulk's rage had no bounds, leaving a trail of wreckage, while Wolverine's precision left behind silence punctuated only by death. Varkal Prime was no longer a battlefield. It was a testament to the arrival of beings whose strength and cunning rivaled the Emperor himself. Amid the chaos, a lone inquisitor observed the carnage with a mix of awe and dread. They are not chaos, and yet they are beyond the Emperor's reach, he whispered. The implications were staggering. If Hulk and Wolverine could not be controlled, if their rage and skill continued unchecked, entire worlds might fall before their path of destruction. The galaxy, vast and warped, born as it was, had never seen such forces, and the question loomed larger than any human mind could endure. Could anything survive them? And so, as night fell over Varkal Prime, the first whispers of legend began. Soldiers, psychers, and survivors would speak of the day rage and claws walked among the stars, a day when the universe seemed to pause in awe and terror. The galaxy had changed, the Imperium had been tested, and two beings from another reality had arrived, unstoppable and unpredictable, in a universe where war was the only constant. The sun had barely risen over the shattered plains of Varkal Prime when the next wave of Imperial response reached the battlefield. Survivors of the Valyrian 7th had regrouped, attempting to fortify what little remained of their defenses. Tanks creaked into position, lascannons aligned, and squads of guardsmen huddled behind debris, their morale fragile, but their resolve stubborn. Across the sky, Voidcraft relayed messages from orbit. Reinforcements were on the way, though they would not arrive in time to prevent the havoc already unfolding. Hulk had not rested. His enormous frame moved like a storm across the field, fists swinging, leaving craters in his wake. Entire armored columns were reduced to molten steel with a single blow. Guardsmen who had moments earlier fired their last rounds were crushed beneath the shockwave of his stride. And yet, Hulk did not discriminate. Friend or foe, ally or enemy, all were collateral in the tempest of his rage. His roars echoed across the valleys, a sound so primal it seemed to awaken the dead bones of the planet itself. Wolverine, by contrast, was a specter of silent death. He stalked the remnants of enemy squads with an eerie patience, appearing and disappearing in the smoke and dust. Each strike was precise, calculated to end life instantly. Officers fell to his claws before they could even issue orders, and sergeants who tried to rally their men were met with sudden, brutal ends. Unlike Hulk, Wolverine's attacks were surgical, almost artful in their lethality, yet no less terrifying for their efficiency. The first Space Marines to respond were from the Crimson Sentinels chapter, elite warriors dispatched by the sector's chapter master after initial reports of chaos on Varkal Prime reached orbit. Landing in drop pods, they deployed amidst the devastation, bolters raised and chainswords humming. They had faced demons, Xenos horrors, and traitor Astartes, but nothing in their extensive battle records had prepared them for what awaited. Hulk noticed them almost immediately. He let out a roar that shattered the air itself, and the ground beneath the landing pods cracked and buckled. Drop pods were crushed under his fists before they could fully open, Space Marines inside barely surviving the initial impact. Bolter fire tore into his massive frame, but rounds glanced off muscle and reinforced bone with little effect. Each Marine that approached found themselves flung aside like ragdolls, their precision irrelevant in the face of overwhelming power. Wolverine moved through the chaos like a shadow, intercepting Marines who attempted to flank Hulk. With swift, fluid motions, he dismantled their weapons, tore through armor, and left a trail of incapacitated warriors. His movements were deliberate, controlled, almost clinical, a stark contrast to Hulk's raw, unstoppable fury. Despite the carnage, Wolverine remained focused, aware of every threat, every movement, calculating his next strike with deadly accuracy. Meanwhile, the remnants of the Chaos cultists, previously cackling in confidence, were beginning to understand the true horror of what had appeared before them. Demonic creatures stirred in the warp, sensing kindred energy in Hulk's raw rage, yet even they recoiled at the power he unleashed. Sorcerers attempted to warp reality, hurling psychic fire and summoning demons, but Hulk's body seemed resistant to psychic manipulation, and Wolverine's regenerative abilities deflected minor warp corruption. The two mutants were anomalies the warp had never seen, impossible to predict, impossible to control. Lieutenant Chaos, still alive and directing survivors, realized the Imperium's usual strategies were useless. Artillery bombardments had no effect, infantry could not stand before the onslaught, and even Space Marines were barely slowing the march of devastation. With grim determination, he ordered squads to focus on evacuation and civilian protection, hoping to preserve life where the Imperium's might could not. In orbit, Inquisitor Varentes observed the battlefield with increasing horror. His psychic sight stretched across the warp, seeking understanding, yet the phenomena he witnessed defied all known science and sorcery. These are not demons, they are not mutants, and yet they consume all in their path, he muttered, the words trembling on his lips. He dispatched urgent messages across the sector, calling for reinforcements, psychers, and specialized units capable of containing anomalies. None had arrived yet, and each passing minute saw the battlefield become more unrecognizable. Hulk's rage escalated as he encountered more organized resistance. Titans of the Imperium, massive war machines bristling with weapons, lumbered into position to intercept him. The green giant turned toward them, and the ground quaked with anticipation. With a single swing of his massive arm, he destroyed a Reaver Titan's legs, sending it crashing into a ruined valley. Its autocannons discharged in a futile spray of fire, barely scratching the surface of his skin. Marines attempted to assault him alongside the Titans, but every movement Hulk made tore apart the battlefield further. Wolverine, sensing the potential threat to the fragile balance of the battlefield, began to intercept Chaos sorcerers attempting to manipulate the warp. He moved silently, appearing where he was least expected, dismantling ritual circles and severing cult leaders with lethal precision. His healing factor allowed him to shrug off minor psychic burns, and his adamantium claws made him nearly unstoppable against both flesh and ceramite. While Hulk raged like a force of nature, Wolverine's presence imposed a deadly order upon the chaos, a counterpoint of deadly efficiency. By midday, Varkal Prime had become a place of myth in the making. Survivors whispered tales of impossible strength and unending ferocity. The planet itself bore the scars of their arrival. Forests reduced to kindling, mountains shattered, and rivers boiled by the sheer energy of the conflict. Reports began to filter into neighboring systems. Two beings had appeared, unstoppable and alien, and their path of destruction had already begun to unsettle even the most disciplined of Imperial leaders, and yet Hulk and Wolverine had not clashed with each other. Misunderstandings were inevitable. Hulk's rage often misread Wolverine's calculated strikes, but the two remained focused on the immediate threats. Their temporary cooperation, whether conscious or accidental, left the Imperium bewildered. Two invaders, alien and incomprehensible, operating in tandem yet with no allegiance to any faction. Their presence forced the defenders to adapt or die, and the galaxy was beginning to understand that this was no ordinary war. As the sun dipped below the horizon once more, the survivors of the Valyrian 7th regrouped, their numbers drastically reduced, morale fragile, and hope nearly extinguished. Titans lay in ruins, tanks smoldered, and the once proud regiments were now shadows of their former selves. Yet, whispers spread of a new legend, two beings whose power rivaled the Emperor's might, and whose arrival had forever changed the fate of Varkal Prime. The galaxy would never forget this day, and the Imperium, vast and unyielding as it was, had encountered forces beyond its understanding. The next battle was inevitable. Hulk and Wolverine would continue their rampage, their path eventually intersecting with the mightiest of Imperial forces, including chapter masters, planetary governors, and perhaps even the intervention of entities from the warp itself. Their arrival marked not only a new chapter in the galaxy's history, but a reckoning that no mortal, or immortal, could predict. The devastation on Varkal Prime had reached a scale few could comprehend. Entire cities were leveled, forests burned to ash, and the ground itself bore scars deep enough to rival canyons. The survivors of the Valyrian 7th Regiment clung to life, whispering of the two alien forces that had arrived unbidden from the stars. Yet it was not just the Imperial forces who noticed the newcomers. Across the warp, entities stirred beings of malice and cunning, demons and chaos gods, who sensed the intrusion of power beyond their dominion. The galaxy, vast and ancient, had never faced threats quite like this, and the implications began to ripple across worlds and sectors alike. In orbit above Varkal Prime, the Imperium's response escalated. Strike cruisers and battle barges were dispatched, carrying elite units of the Adeptus Astartes, including the famed Crimson Sentinels and the Iron Vanguards. Titans, Imperial Knights, and elite Psykers were mobilized, forming a formidable force meant to contain the two anomalies. Yet even as they deployed, dread hung in the minds of commanders. Reports from the surface told of Hulk demolishing armor, of Wolverine slicing through ceramite like it were paper, and of psychic disturbances that even the most experienced Psykers could not fully explain. Hulk, for his part, seemed unaware of the strategic machinations of the Imperium. His rage drove him forward, smashing everything in his path, yet a strange curiosity glimmered in his expression when he encountered the towering Titans and armored space marines. Each step sent tremors across the plains, knocking over buildings and rupturing artillery emplacements. Wolverine, ever the predator, stalked the battlefield with a careful focus, anticipating attacks, eliminating threats with silent efficiency, and keeping Hulk's path from completely annihilating potential obstacles of interest. The first true engagement with elite forces came when a detachment of Iron Vanguards attempted a coordinated assault. Drop pods fell across the devastated plains, deploying squads of Space Marines armed with plasma guns, power swords, and melta-weapons. Titans advanced alongside them, weapons blazing. The Imperium had fought demons, orcs, and the deadliest Xenos legions, but nothing had prepared them for the two alien predators now standing on Varkal Prime. Hulk reacted instantly, his roar shattering the air and shaking the ground with seismic intensity. Titans staggered under the shockwave, autocannons misfiring as the ground ruptured beneath their feet. One massive swing of his fist sent a Reaver-class Titan careening into a crater, tearing through reinforced plating as though it were cardboard. Marines charging alongside found themselves flung aside, thrown into debris or flattened beneath the weight of his power. His rage was not directed. It was pure, indiscriminate, and absolute, a force of nature that no weapon could contain. Wolverine, however, imposed a different kind of terror. He moved unseen, striking at sorcerers attempting to warp reality to their advantage. He leapt onto the backs of armored space marines, claws cutting through power armor with terrifying precision, severing tendons and organs faster than even enhanced warriors could react. His attacks were clean, efficient, and lethal, leaving the battlefield littered with corpses in patterns almost surgical in their brutality. Unlike Hulk, Wolverine fought with purpose, calculated patience, and a near prescient understanding of his opponent's weaknesses. From the warp, chaos stirred in intrigue. Greater demons whispered in tongues older than the stars, sensing potential allies or rivals in these strange invaders. Some demons attempted to possess or manipulate Hulk's rage, but they were rebuffed by the alien resilience of his mind. Others sought to ensnare Wolverine, yet his will and regenerative abilities made him resistant to even the most insidious demonic manipulation. The warp itself was uncertain, unsettled by these anomalies that should not exist in its domain. Lieutenant Chaos, still leading what remained of his forces, barely comprehended the scale of the engagement. He had witnessed the devastation wrought by Hulk and Wolverine, and had ordered evacuation for any surviving civilians. But even as the Imperium brought its full might to bear, the two alien forces continued to challenge reality itself. Every strategy failed, every advance was met with force beyond expectation, and every retreat revealed new levels of destruction in their wake. Amidst the chaos, tension began to rise not between the Imperium and the invaders, but between Hulk and Wolverine themselves. While they had so far operated in a tenuous, unspoken truce, the combination of their differing natures and the relentless pressure of the battlefield sowed the seeds of conflict. Hulk's rage was raw and unbridled, driven by instinct, emotion, and the need to destroy any perceived threat. Wolverine, in contrast, fought with controlled precision, focusing on the elimination of specific targets while avoiding unnecessary collateral destruction, at least where possible. Their paths would inevitably cross, and when they did, it would be a battle of titans unlike any the galaxy had ever witnessed. In orbit, Inquisitor Varentes observed the unfolding conflict with a mixture of fascination and dread. He had contacted high ranking authorities across the sector, warning that Hulk and Wolverine were beyond standard classification. These are not servants of chaos. He stated to the High Lord's representative via comm, they are anomalies and they will not stop for anything, friend or foe. Containment is impossible. Understanding may be beyond us entirely. His words echoed the sentiments of commanders across the galaxy. This was a threat of a scale previously unimagined, a force that could redefine war itself. As the battle stretched into days, Varkal Prime became a theater of mythic destruction. Cities were erased from the map, forests turned to ash, and the skies were thick with smoke and warp-tainted clouds. Hulk rampaged through everything in his path, his fury unmatched, while Wolverine continued his methodical extermination of chaos-aligned forces, occasionally intersecting Hulk's path in near misses that hinted at the violent confrontation looming in the near future. Even the Imperium's elite forces began to understand that conventional strategies were useless. Titans were immobilized, bolters had little effect, and even psychic bombardments failed to contain the anomalies. The galaxy's greatest warriors were forced into a defensive posture, watching as two beings from another universe tore through centuries of preparation and engineering. And as night fell once more, the whispers began. Two names that would haunt the stars forever: Hulk and Wolverine. The stage was set. Hulk's unstoppable rage, Wolverine's lethal precision, and the Imperium's desperate attempts to respond formed the tension-filled crucible that would soon explode. Both invaders were powerful, both were unpredictable, and neither was likely to relent. The question that now loomed over Varkal Prime and the wider galaxy was simple yet terrifying. Who, or what, would survive when rage met claw in the heart of the 41st millennium? Varkal Prime had become unrecognizable. Where once proud cities had stood, now only smoldering ruins remained, jagged steel and stone jutting from the scarred earth like broken teeth. Forests had been reduced to ash, rivers boiled away, and the very atmosphere seemed charged with the raw, uncontained power of Hulk's rage. Wolverine moved through the chaos like a silent shadow, leaving no trace but death, his claws slicing through both chaos and Imperial soldiers with terrifying precision. The planet was no longer a battleground. It was a crucible, a proving ground for forces that defied reason. The Imperium responded with all the fury and ingenuity it could muster. Titans moved in coordinated formations, their massive cannons targeting Hulk's approach, while drop pods deployed squads of Adeptus Astartes to flank him. Artillery emplacements, long-range bombardments, and psyker fire rained down on both invaders, attempting to contain their destruction. Yet each measure seemed only to provoke greater devastation. Hulk shrugged off blasts that could level mountains, crushing titans beneath his fists as though they were mere toys. Wolverine, ever the hunter, stalked through the chaos, intercepting cultists, sorcerers, and rogue elements, ensuring that no one survived to regroup. Chaos forces, sensing the opportunity, began to intervene in earnest. Demons of all shapes and sizes emerged from the warp, drawn to Hulk's rage as if it were a beacon. Greater demons sought to possess him, but Hulk's mind was alien to the warp's manipulation, resisting their psychic assaults with sheer force of will. Wolverine, meanwhile, intercepted chaos sorcerers attempting to manipulate the battlefield, his healing factor countering minor psychic burns while his claws dismantled the ritualists with surgical precision. Even the warp seemed uncertain how to deal with these anomalies, entities that existed outside its normal laws and yet thrived within it. The clash escalated into a spectacle of destruction that spanned the entire planet. Titans were torn asunder, their weapons scattering debris across the plains. Entire regiments of Imperial guardsmen were annihilated, their cries of defiance swallowed by Hulk's roars and Wolverine's silent efficiency. Buildings collapsed in clouds of fire and dust, forests ignited, and rivers boiled as Hulk advanced. Wolverine, by contrast, left devastation that was precise, controlled, and terrifying in its silent brutality. Together, they became a force of nature, unpredictable, unstoppable, and utterly alien. Amid the chaos, the tension between Hulk and Wolverine began to simmer. Their paths intersected repeatedly on the battlefield. Hulk, driven by pure, uncontrolled rage, occasionally lashed out at Wolverine, misreading his silent movements as threats. Wolverine, calculating and patient, avoided direct confrontation while observing Hulk's overwhelming destructive power. There was no alliance, no understanding, only a grudging coexistence forced by circumstance. And yet, the inevitable confrontation loomed, a collision of unstoppable force and unyielding will that would shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. In orbit, Inquisitor Verentes and his fellow strategists watched helplessly as the planet was transformed into a tableau of war and chaos. Communications were lost or distorted by the warp anomalies surrounding the planet. Reinforcements were delayed or destroyed before they could intervene, and every report made the same terrifying truth clear: conventional strategy could not stop these two invaders. The Imperium's greatest heroes, its titans, and its psychers were unable to contain the unprecedented threat. The galaxy had never faced beings of such raw, unbridled power, beings who existed outside the known laws of reality. Chaos forces, sensing a greater opportunity, attempted to manipulate the situation further. Sorcerers summoned waves of demons, hoping to turn Hulk's rage against Wolverine, or to overwhelm them both with sheer numbers. Greater demons attempted direct possession, while chaos cultists tried to lure Wolverine into traps. Yet the invaders proved resistant to manipulation. Hulk's rage was too primal, too uncontrolled to be predicted or guided, while Wolverine's mind and healing factor made him nearly impervious to psychic influence. The forces of chaos were forced to adapt to the alien calculus of the battle, and even they recognized that these intruders were beyond normal comprehension. As the conflict stretched on, the Imperium attempted a desperate gambit. Entire fleets bombarded the surface, orbital macro, weapons fired massive shells, and elite Astartes chapters prepared to engage in direct assault. Yet every effort met the same result. Hulk absorbed punishment that would destroy entire regiments, while Wolverine moved through the battlefield with lethal grace, dismantling any who dared confront him. The planet itself groaned under the stress, tectonic shifts caused by Hulk's movement, sending shockwaves across the landscape. And still, the two invaders did not engage each other directly. Their methods of destruction were different. Hulk's rage was a storm of indiscriminate violence, while Wolverine's precision carved a path of selective annihilation. But their paths were drawing closer. Every encounter, every near miss, was a prelude to the inevitable, the collision of two forces beyond imagination. The galaxy, the Imperium, and even the warp itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when force and ferocity would finally meet. By the time night fell on Varkal Prime once more, the planet had been irrevocably changed. Craters and smoldering ruins marked the passage of the invaders. Entire regiments lay decimated, and the surviving Imperial commanders whispered of legends that could never be verified. Hulk's roars echoed across the desolation, while Wolverine moved silently, a shadow among the ruins, unseen yet deadly. The Imperium was beginning to comprehend the terrifying truth. They were witnessing not merely a battle, but a cataclysm, the likes of which the galaxy had never experienced. And in the growing tension between the two invaders, a silent question formed across the minds of those who survived to witness it. What would happen when rage finally met claw, when the green juggernaut collided with the unyielding predator? The answer none could yet know, but the stage had been set, the players had taken their positions, and the first act of what would become a galaxy-shattering conflict was coming to a climax. The plains of Varkal Prime were a wasteland of fire and ruin. The screams of the fallen echoed across shattered cities, scorched forests, and smoking craters, a haunting symphony of destruction. It had been weeks since Hulk and Wolverine arrived, and their presence had reshaped the planet entirely. Titans lay broken, armies were reduced to fragments, and even the warp itself seemed to writhe uneasily at the unprecedented forces that now walked among mortals. The survivors of the Valyrian 7th Regiment and even the elite chapters of the Adeptus Astartes had begun to whisper the impossible, that the two alien beings were forces beyond comprehension, unstoppable and alien to the universe itself. Hulk roared once more, his rage swelling to a new peak. The planet's crust trembled beneath his steps, fissures spreading outward like spiderwebs as he advanced through the ruins of a ruined hive city. Entire barracks had collapsed beneath his fists, and tanks and artillery were tossed aside like children's toys. Yet even as he smashed indiscriminately, there was a focus growing in his eyes, a recognition of Wolverine. The smaller figure moved through the wreckage with the same deadly precision as ever, stalking the battlefield, eliminating chaos cultists and corrupted soldiers with surgical efficiency. Their paths, until now tangential, were drawing inexorably closer. Wolverine noticed Hulk too. The green juggernaut's presence radiated power unlike anything Wolverine had ever faced, a force raw, unpredictable, and unrestrained. He had adapted to countless battlefields and survived unimaginable horrors, but even he paused briefly to assess the threat of this living storm. Despite his patience and control, the claws flexed in anticipation. The stage was set. One clash would shake the planet, the Imperium, and the warp itself. Chaos forces, sensing opportunity, began to interfere with even greater urgency. Greater demons sought to manipulate Hulk's rage, hoping to turn him against Wolverine, or against the Imperium entirely. Sorcerers cast immense psychic spells, attempting to bind Wolverine or ensnare him in lethal traps. Yet both invaders proved resistant beyond expectation. Hulk's alien mind was impervious to psychic suggestion, and his strength made possession impossible. Wolverine's healing factor and disciplined mind countered psychic attacks, and his keen instincts allowed him to evade traps with near prescient timing. The first direct encounter came suddenly. Wolverine leapt from the shadows of a shattered cathedral, claws extended, aiming for Hulk's massive shoulder. Hulk reacted instinctively, swinging a fist with enough force to annihilate a building. Wolverine darted aside, moving with unearthly speed, striking again, his claws cutting shallowly across green flesh. Not enough to harm significantly, but enough to provoke the beast. Hulk's roar echoed across the plains, a sound that seemed to shake the air itself. Their first real confrontation had begun not out of malice, but out of the collision of instincts and uncontainable power. The battle escalated instantly. Hulk swung and smashed, each strike tearing through what remained of the cityscape. Wolverine dodged, weaving between craters and rubble, landing precise blows whenever the opportunity arose. Their fight was a storm of contrast. Hulk, raw, explosive, overwhelming. Wolverine, controlled, calculated, unyielding. Each impact sent shockwaves that toppled titans and disrupted entire squads of space marines. The Imperium's elite forces, caught between two alien powers, struggled desperately to maintain control, their strategies unraveling in the face of pure destruction. Chaos forces attempted to manipulate the engagement, sending demons to flank Hulk and psychic attacks to ensnare Wolverine. Yet these interventions only intensified the battle. Hulk's fury was amplified, crushing entire squadrons in waves of raw power, while Wolverine's efficiency cut down both Chaos and Imperial units alike, ensuring that neither side could predict the outcome. The two invaders had become a storm the galaxy could not control, a force beyond morality, beyond strategy, and beyond comprehension. As their fight continued, the ground itself reacted. Mountains cracked, rivers boiled, and the very air trembled. Hulk's sheer weight shattered bunkers and artillery lines, while Wolverine's relentless strikes dismantled squads that attempted to flank him. Every swing every slash, every roar and hiss of claws drove the planet closer to total devastation. The Imperium's fleet above could only watch, powerless, as the war on Varkal Prime became a spectacle of destruction that no records could truly capture. And still, neither Hulk nor Wolverine yielded. The battle had evolved beyond survival or strategy. It had become instinct and will clashing in their purest form. Hulk's rage, infinite and explosive, met Wolverine's unyielding control and precision. Each was a mirror to the other, one raw chaos, one disciplined lethality, yet both equally alien to the galaxy they now fought within. Their collision tore the remaining defenses apart, scattering Imperial forces and chaos alike in a storm of unmatched ferocity. In orbit, Inquisitor Verentes and his council struggled to understand the scale of the conflict. Psychers screamed in agony at the readings from the planet. Fleets were immobilized by gravitational anomalies created by the sheer mass of destruction below. "They are beyond the Emperor," Verentes whispered, the words trembling. "They are beyond chaos. They are something else entirely." He dispatched desperate orders for evacuation, containment, and observation. But the galaxy's finest could only watch as the titanic battle unfolded. By nightfall, Varkal Prime had been reduced to a landscape of fire, rubble, and cratered plains. The roars of Hulk echoed across the ruins, and the silent, lethal precision of Wolverine carved a path of carnage. They had clashed directly, the two alien forces testing each other's limits, yet both remained unstoppable. The Imperium and Chaos alike had been humbled, reduced to spectators in a war that no strategy, no devotion, and no force could hope to contain. The question now hung over the planet like a storm cloud. How long could such forces continue unchecked? How much of the galaxy would survive their presence? And when the inevitable confrontation between Rage and Claw reached its final crescendo, what would remain of Varkal Prime, or the universe itself? The battlefield of Varkal Prime was no longer recognizable. Craters scarred the land like wounds, forests were reduced to smoking ruins, and cities had vanished beneath Hulk's relentless assaults and Wolverine's precise devastation. The sky glowed with unnatural green and violet hues from the lingering warp rift, a constant reminder that reality itself was unstable. Even the Imperium's fleet above quivered in response, the Voidcraft buffeted by warp turbulence, unable to provide meaningful support. Hulk roared again, swinging his massive fists through the remaining artillery lines. Titans fell beneath his blows, their armored frames reduced to molten metal and fractured steel. Wolverine moved through the chaos with calculated precision, striking at chaos sorcerers attempting to manipulate the warp and picking off remaining Astartes who approached too closely. Their paths intersected repeatedly, tension growing with each encounter, yet neither could dominate the other. Rage met Claw, strength met skill, and the planet itself shook beneath their power. Then, from the depths of the warp, a new terror emerged. A greater demon, colossal even by the standards of the 41st millennium, tore through the remains of the battlefield. Its body was a writhing mass of tentacles, claws, and eyes that glowed with unholy light. Each step it took sent shockwaves that rivaled Hulk's own movements, and its roar was a psychic assault, driving soldiers to madness. Chaos cultists cheered, sensing the opportunity to exploit the battle between the two invaders. But the demon had a mind of its own, a hunger for destruction that rivaled Hulk's fury. Hulk paused, sensing a force that could challenge his strength. His eyes, glowing with green intensity, fixed on the demon. Wolverine, too, recognized the threat. The creature moved with terrifying intent, cutting down everything in its path. For the first time, their survival instincts aligned. The two alien forces, previously at odds, now faced a common enemy that threatened to overwhelm them both. Their temporary alliance was unspoken, instinctual. Hulk charged, smashing through the demon's minions, while Wolverine leapt and struck with surgical precision. The ground shook as Hulk's fists collided with the demon's armored limbs, sending shockwaves that toppled the remaining Titans and scattered Imperial forces. Wolverine moved with lethal grace, cutting through the demon's appendages and striking at weak points the massive creature could not defend. Together, they became a force of near unimaginable destruction, a storm that even chaos itself struggled to comprehend. The Imperium, watching from orbit, could only marvel at the devastation. Entire regiments had been annihilated, Titans destroyed, and yet the alien invaders continued to fight, now against a common enemy that defied all known laws. Psychers screamed at the readings, warning that the warp rift above the planet had grown unstable, threatening to tear reality itself. Yet neither Hulk nor Wolverine paused to consider the consequences. Instinct, survival, and fury drove them forward. The battle was cataclysmic. Hulk's fists struck the greater demon with unmatched force, each blow creating massive craters. Wolverine, moving with preternatural speed, carved through the demon's tentacles, striking at eyes and joints that even Hulk could not reach. Chaos forces attempted to intervene, summoning more demons and attempting psychic manipulation, but the two invaders adapted effortlessly. Hulk's rage made him resistant to psychic assault, while Wolverine's healing factor and combat skill rendered him nearly untouchable. Even as they fought side by side, tension simmered beneath the surface. Hulk's rage was raw, explosive, and unpredictable, while Wolverine's strikes were calculated, precise, and unyielding. Each knew that this temporary alliance was fragile. One misstep, one perceived attack, and their collision would resume with catastrophic force. Yet for now, necessity demanded cooperation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the greater demon lay mortally wounded, its massive form twitching and burning under the combined assault of rage and claw. Hulk roared triumphantly, shaking the ground with each step, while Wolverine stood silently, his claws retracted, eyes scanning for other threats. For the first time, they had fought as a team, an uneasy, unspoken agreement forged in the heat of destruction. Above the planet, the Imperium began to understand the implications. Two alien forces, previously uncontrollable, had now demonstrated the ability to work together, but only against a threat that even they could not dominate alone. Commanders debated whether to attempt communication, containment, or immediate evacuation of all surviving forces. Meanwhile, Chaos forces recoiled, realizing that their attempts to manipulate the invaders had failed, and that these beings were now a direct threat to the demon's ambitions. The night was silent for the first time in weeks. Varkal Prime lay in ruins, a scarred and broken world, yet Hulk and Wolverine remained standing. Both were battered, both were bloodied, but neither would yield. Their alliance, temporary as it was, had demonstrated one truth: the galaxy's most formidable forces, both mortal and demonic, could not contain them. And while their next confrontation was inevitable, for now, the battlefield lay quiet save for the whispers of survivors, the crackle of warp energy, and the ever-present tension between rage and claw. The stage was set for what would come next. Hulk and Wolverine, each a force beyond comprehension, had proven unstoppable individually and near invincible together. The Imperium had seen the future of war, and it was terrifying. Chaos had glimpsed the power of beings it could neither control nor corrupt. And the galaxy itself had felt the tremors of a conflict that would echo for millennia. The question now was no longer if Hulk and Wolverine would clash again. It was when, and what the universe would endure when they did. The scorched plains of Varkal Prime trembled beneath an uneasy silence. For days, Hulk and Wolverine had clashed indirectly, their paths brushing across the battlefield, their destructive forces reshaping mountains and rivers alike. Then came the inevitable moment, a direct confrontation, a collision of raw, unstoppable rage with lethal precision. The air itself seemed to shiver as Hulk's massive form advanced across the cratered landscape, each step sending shockwaves that buckled the ground. Wolverine emerged from the shadows, claws glinting in the pale light of a fractured sky, every movement a predator ready to strike. Neither spoke. Words were meaningless in the presence of such power. Hulk's growl rumbled like a thunderstorm, shaking the air around him, while Wolverine's silent gaze was sharp, calculating, unflinching. The planet itself seemed to hold its breath, the forests, rivers, and mountains trembling at the anticipation of what was about to occur. Every Imperial survivor and Chaos operative watching from a distance knew that this clash would define the fate of Varkal Prime, perhaps even leaving a mark across the galaxy itself. The first strike came from Wolverine. With inhuman speed, he lunged, claws aimed at Hulk's massive shoulder. Hulk reacted instinctively, swinging a fist that would have crushed a tank. Wolverine twisted midair, slashing along Hulk's arm, leaving only superficial cuts on green flesh, but enough to ignite the giant's fury. Hulk roared, a sound that rolled across the plains like an earthquake, and charged. Mountains cracked beneath his massive feet as he closed the distance. The ground fractured into chasms, and dust clouds swallowed the horizon. Hulk's strength was unmatched, and every swing of his fists tore through the remnants of the battlefield. Wolverine dodged with supernatural agility, striking at exposed muscle and joint, each attack designed to wound, distract, and provoke. The two forces moved like titanic predators in a deadly dance, Hulk's raw power meeting Wolverine's calculated precision in a spectacle that left entire regiments of Imperial guardsmen and Chaos cultists paralyzed with fear. Chaos forces attempted to intervene, hoping to tip the balance. Greater demons hurled psychic attacks, warp storms erupted, and cultists sought to flank Wolverine, believing the fight would weaken both invaders. Yet both Hulk and Wolverine adapted instinctively. Hulk's alien physiology made him resistant to psychic manipulation, and Wolverine's regenerative abilities allowed him to shrug off minor attacks. Each move, each strike, was a testament to their unparalleled resilience. The battlefield became a storm of destruction. Titans and Imperial artillery were tossed aside by Hulk's fury, their massive weapons useless against his raw might. Wolverine moved through the chaos with lethal elegance, dismantling squads of enemies before they could interfere. Every encounter, every swing, every slash reshaped the battlefield. Mountains shattered, rivers boiled, and the very air seemed charged with energy, as if the planet itself were screaming under the force of their battle. For the first time, observers both mortal and demonic sensed the full scale of what they were witnessing. Space Marines, elite psychers, and Imperial commanders alike realized that this was not a fight that could be controlled, predicted, or contained. Hulk and Wolverine existed beyond strategy, beyond morality, and beyond the known laws of physics. The very concept of balance in the galaxy seemed irrelevant in the face of their raw power. Hours stretched into an eternity as the battle raged. Hulk's roars shook the heavens, sending shockwaves through the battlefield, while Wolverine's claws cut a path of silent, calculated carnage. Yet neither gained a definitive advantage. Each collision, each near strike, escalated the tension. Hulk's rage was raw, uncontainable, and limitless, but Wolverine's precision and speed countered every move with surgical effectiveness. The two forces were evenly matched not in strength, but in resilience and adaptability. Above the battlefield, Inquisitor Verentes watched in awe and terror. Psychers aboard Imperial ships screamed at the psychic readings, warning that the warp rift above the planet had grown unstable. Entire fleets held their breath as they observed the destruction below. They are beyond the Emperor, beyond chaos, beyond comprehension. Verentes whispered, "Nothing can stop them, nothing can contain them," and yet his words trailed off as Hulk and Wolverine clashed again, the shockwaves ripping through the planet's crust. Amid the carnage, a fleeting understanding seemed to pass between the two invaders. Hulk's rage was a force of destruction, but it was also instinctive. Wolverine's precision was lethal, but restrained by strategy and control. For the briefest moment, they recognized each other not as enemies, but as forces beyond the universe itself, powers that could reshape worlds at will. Yet this understanding did not stop the fight. Perhaps it even fueled it. The clash reached its peak when Hulk slammed into the remains of a crater, sending debris flying into the sky, while Wolverine leapt onto his back, claws raking along reinforced muscle. Hulk spun violently, throwing Wolverine across a valley, who landed deftly on a ridge, ready to strike again. The landscape around them was obliterated. Forests burned to cinders, rivers boiled away, and the ground split open from the force of their blows. Even as their battle escalated, the Imperium and Chaos continued to interfere, yet their actions were increasingly irrelevant. Titans fell, regiments were annihilated, and sorcerers found their spells deflected or absorbed. Hulk and Wolverine were a storm that could not be predicted, controlled, or stopped. Every blow, every maneuver, every roar and strike reminded the galaxy that Varkal Prime was no longer merely a planet. It was a crucible, a testament to forces beyond comprehension. As night fell, the battle showed no signs of ending. Hulk and Wolverine, battered, bloodied, but unbroken, stood amidst the ruins of the planet, ready to continue their titanic confrontation. The sky above swirled with warp energy, the ground trembled beneath their power, and the whispers of survivors echoed across the ruined plains. Two names that would haunt the galaxy forever. Hulk and Wolverine. The question remained, how long could such forces continue unchecked? How much of Varkal Prime, or the galaxy itself, would survive? And when this battle finally reached its conclusion, what would remain of the universe as the 41st millennium knew it? The battlefield of Varkal Prime was a silent graveyard. Smoke hung thick in the sky, the ground cracked and broken under the weight of titanic blows, and rivers ran red from the carnage of countless deaths. Hulk stood at the center of the devastation, his massive chest heaving, fists clenched, muscles rippling with residual rage. Wolverine emerged from the shadows, claws sheathed but still dripping with the blood of foes, his body battered, but his senses alert, scanning the wasteland for threats. For the first time in days, the two aliens regarded each other without immediate hostility. Their previous clashes had reshaped the planet, obliterated armies, and shattered even the most disciplined formations of space marines. Yet now, in the eerie calm after the storm, there was a grudging recognition. Neither had bested the other, and perhaps neither could. The instinct for destruction remained, but so too did the understanding that mutual conflict could risk annihilating everything around them, including the planet that had, unknowingly, become their crucible. The Imperium had not recovered. Orbital fleets hovered above the shattered world, scanning for survivors, the ruined cities beneath them uninhabitable and smoldering. Entire regiments of the Valyrian 7th Regiment lay annihilated, Titans were broken monuments of steel, and psychers aboard the command ships trembled as they tried to interpret the anomalous energy readings from the warp rift still lingering above the planet. Even the most battle-hardened commanders knew that conventional strategies had failed. They had witnessed forces that could not be controlled, contained, or reasoned with. Chaos forces, meanwhile, recoiled. Sorcerers whispered incantations in desperation, attempting to manipulate what remained of their demonic allies. Greater demons had been slain, scattered, or repelled, leaving cultists terrified and leaderless amidst the ruins. The warp itself seemed to shiver in the presence of Hulk and Wolverine, unsure how to influence beings that were neither fully mortal nor fully subject to its manipulations. The galaxy had never seen anomalies like these before, and the consequences were only beginning to be understood. Hulk, though exhausted, still radiated raw, unrestrained power. Every muscle, every breath, was a testament to the limitless fury he carried. Wolverine, though wounded and weary, remained a predator in every sense, his body honed for survival and combat, his mind calculating the next move with unerring precision. Their temporary truce was silent, instinctual and understanding, forged not from friendship, but from mutual recognition of power and potential threat. The first cautious movements came from the Imperial forces. Scouts and recon squads cautiously approached, attempting to assess the situation without provoking another wave of destruction. Lieutenant Caius, battered but alive, directed survivors from makeshift shelters, coordinating limited evacuations and reporting on the status of the planet. "They've stopped for now," he whispered to his few remaining officers, "but the moment they notice us, it won't end well." His voice trembled, though his resolve remained. Even in the silence, the tension was palpable. Hulk's breathing shook the ground with every exhale, while Wolverine's gaze never left him, alert for the slightest movement that might signal a resumption of conflict. Around them, the remnants of armies, broken titans, and ruined cities bore witness to their power, a testament to forces beyond comprehension. Above, Inquisitor Varentes observed with grim fascination. "They are not servants of chaos," he muttered. "They are not aligned with the Imperium. They are something else entirely. Beings who exist outside the rules of this galaxy, yet whose actions reshape it nonetheless." His advisors debated containment, communication, and observation, yet all agreed on one thing. Varkal Prime had been irrevocably changed, and these two forces would continue to influence the galaxy in ways no one could predict. The warp rift above the planet pulsed faintly, a reminder that the anomaly which brought Hulk and Wolverine into this universe still lingered. Psychers aboard orbiting vessels sensed its potential for further disruption, and some whispered that more such beings could emerge, or that the existing invaders might draw even greater entities from the warp itself. Chaos cultists, scattered and leaderless, fled in terror, knowing that neither their gods nor their spells could influence these beings effectively. Hulk and Wolverine, aware of the fragile calm, maintained a cautious distance. The fight had ended for now, but the tension remained, unspoken yet undeniable. Each had proven their strength, each had survived the other's attacks, and each had left the planet forever changed. Varkal Prime was a testament to their presence, scarred, broken, and unforgettable. As night fell, a new understanding seemed to settle. The temporary truce, forced by necessity against greater threats and mutual respect for each other's capabilities, allowed for a brief respite. The Imperium began planning recovery and evacuation. Chaos retreated to regroup, and the planet itself began the slow process of absorbing the violence that had been unleashed upon it. Yet all who survived knew this. Hulk and Wolverine were not finished. Their paths would cross again, and when they did, the galaxy would tremble once more. And so, amidst the ruin and silence of a world that had witnessed forces beyond comprehension, a question lingered in every mind. What comes next when rage meets claw, when unstoppable force collides with unyielding will, and when the universe itself becomes a stage for powers beyond reckoning? The answer remained unknown, but one truth was certain: Varkal Prime and the galaxy would never be the same. News of Varkal Prime's devastation spread like wildfire through the sector. Word reached high. Ranking officials in the Imperium, planetary governors, chapter masters, and the High Lords themselves received fragmented reports of entire armies annihilated, titans destroyed, and warp anomalies that defied comprehension. Few dared to believe it at first, dismissing the accounts as exaggeration or mass hysteria. Yet orbital scans, warp readings, and survivor testimonies confirmed the terrifying truth. Hulk and Wolverine had arrived, and nothing could contain them. The Imperium convened an emergency council aboard a battle barge in the system's orbit. Chapter masters, inquisitors, and strategic commanders debated responses. Conventional tactics had failed, overwhelming force had been annihilated, and even psychers struggled to interpret the anomalies surrounding the two beings. "They are not chaos. They are not Xenos," one inquisitor said grimly. "They are something else, something beyond our understanding. Any attempt at containment will only accelerate the devastation." Yet even in the face of uncertainty, the Imperium could not remain idle. Plans were drawn, fleets deployed, and specialized strike teams readied warriors forged for the impossible. Chaos forces, meanwhile, seethed with frustration and awe. Their demons had been slaughtered, sorcerers scattered, and cultists left leaderless. The warp itself seemed to resist manipulation, as if the universe had no rules for these intruders. Greater demons whispered to one another across the Imperium, debating whether to withdraw, regroup, or escalate. Their conclusion was unanimous. Hulk and Wolverine were threats of unimaginable scale, beings that must either be corrupted, destroyed, or avoided entirely. Some demon princes saw opportunity, however, whispering promises of power and allegiance, hoping that they might turn these titanic forces to chaos's advantage. Across the sector, worlds began to react. Governors ordered evacuations, fleets were redeployed, and colonies fortified themselves against a potential chain reaction of destruction. Panic spread quietly yet inevitably. Varkal Prime had become the standard by which all subsequent encounters would be measured, a warning that even the mightiest armies were no match for these anomalies. Hulk and Wolverine, meanwhile, had not lingered long on Varkal Prime. The planet was too small, too fragile to contain the scale of their conflict. Hulk's rage, insatiable and boundless, drove him toward new battlefields, while Wolverine, ever the hunter, followed instinctively, seeking challenge, survival, and resolution. Their paths remained intertwined, their tension unresolved, yet the fleeting alliance forged against greater threats had left a temporary understanding. Neither would yield, but neither would annihilate the other outright, at least for now. On their next planetary target, the scale of destruction escalated. Hulk's first steps shattered mountains, rivers boiled, and skies darkened with debris. Wolverine moved silently, dismantling resistance and chaos, affiliated forces alike. Imperial defenses, no matter how elite, proved incapable of containing their assault. Yet the galaxy watched closely, realizing that the consequences of their rampage were not merely local, they were cosmic. Systems might be destabilized, chaos influence disrupted, and the Imperium forced to reconsider everything it knew about warfare. Orbital psychers reported troubling phenomena. The anomalies surrounding Hulk and Wolverine had ripple effects across the warp, causing instability, minor demonic eruptions, and psychic echoes that reached even distant sectors. High-ranking psychers warned that these disturbances could escalate if unchecked, potentially inviting entities from the warp that even the Chaos Gods would struggle to control. Every planetary strike, every confrontation, was no longer just a battle. It was a galactic event with consequences that could last millennia. Amid this chaos, the inevitable clash between Hulk and Wolverine remained unresolved. Each encounter continued to test the limits of strength, precision, and endurance. Hulk's fury reshaped landscapes. Wolverine's calculated strikes left no mortal, or immortal, unscathed. Their conflict, once confined to a single planet, now threatened entire systems. Imperium fleets scrambled to track them, Chaos strategists attempted manipulation, and warp anomalies began appearing on previously stable worlds. Each step they took echoed across light years, leaving devastation and awe in their wake. Varkal Prime, now abandoned save for the most resilient survivors, became a symbol. It was a warning to the Imperium and Chaos alike. These beings were beyond comprehension, beyond control, and beyond containment. And as Hulk and Wolverine moved from world to world, the galaxy began to realize a terrifying truth. This was only the beginning. No planetary defense, no psychic barrier, and no army could hope to match the destructive potential of these anomalies. Amid all this, subtle patterns began to emerge. Chaos forces, previously reactionary, began coordinating on a broader scale, seeking ways to exploit the tension between Hulk and Wolverine. Some demon princes hoped to manipulate Hulk's rage into conflict with Wolverine, while others sought to ensnare Wolverine into traps too complex for mere mortals to navigate. Meanwhile, the Imperium initiated contingency plans across multiple sectors, preparing for planetary evacuations, emergency deployments, and tactical containment operations, even as they realize that conventional strategies were obsolete. In the quiet moments between battles, Hulk's rage simmered, Wolverine's mind calculated, and both began to sense something deeper. The universe itself had taken notice. Their presence was anomalous, unpredictable, and unstoppable. Planets were mere pawns, armies were distractions, and the warp trembled at their influence. Each new battlefield brought new challenges, new devastation, and the undeniable realization that the conflict between Rage and Claw was no longer a local concern. It was a galactic event with consequences that would echo through the stars for centuries, and so the stage was set for the next chapter. Hulk and Wolverine, unstoppable and incomprehensible, would continue their relentless march across the galaxy. The Imperium scrambled to respond, Chaos plotted its revenge, and entire worlds trembled under the shadow of forces that defied understanding. Every clash, every rampage, and every silent confrontation brought the universe closer to an inevitable question. What happens when Rage meets Claw across the breadth of the galaxy itself? The galaxy was in turmoil. Reports poured in from countless systems. Entire planets reduced to rubble, fleets shattered, warp storms erupting in previously stable sectors. Hulk's rampage and Wolverine's precision strikes had become not just a localized phenomenon, but a galactic-scale crisis. No star system was safe. The presence of these two anomalies had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the 41st millennium. Hulk moved through the void like a walking cataclysm. Each world he touched trembled beneath his fury, its crust fracturing, its atmosphere igniting, and its armies crushed under the sheer force of his might. Wolverine followed, striking with unerring accuracy, dismantling chaos, aligned units, rogue psychers, and Imperial squads who sought to intervene. Their conflict had become an unstoppable storm, a combination of brute strength and surgical lethality that left the galaxy reeling in terror and awe. The Imperium scrambled to respond. Entire fleets were dispatched. Titanic super-heavy warships unleashed orbital bombardments, and chapters of Space Marines were mobilized with orders to contain the rampage at any cost. Yet every strategy failed. Hulk shrugged off Titanic weaponry, his fists shattering armor and artillery lines as if they were brittle toys. Wolverine darted through engagements, cutting down even the most elite warriors with his claws, his regenerative power making him nearly untouchable. The Imperium began to understand a terrifying reality. Conventional tactics were meaningless against these forces. Chaos, too, attempted to seize the opportunity. Greater demons coordinated assaults, warp anomalies were summoned, and sorcerers devised intricate schemes to manipulate the battlefield. Yet the invaders adapted effortlessly. Hulk's rage resisted psychic interference, while Wolverine's cunning and resilience countered even the most devious traps. Every attempt at control failed, reinforcing the grim truth. These beings existed outside the rules of the galaxy. The inevitable confrontation intensified. Hulk, sensing Wolverine's presence on the battlefield, roared, the sound rippling across the surface of worlds and through space itself. Wolverine, eyes narrowing, darted from shadow to shadow, claws flexed, calculating every angle, every possibility, every strike. The stage was no longer a single planet. It was a series of battlegrounds spanning entire star systems, each scarred by the echoes of their previous encounters. When they finally collided directly again, the impact was cataclysmic. Hulk swung with the force to level mountains. Wolverine struck with precision that could pierce the strongest ceramite. The clash created shockwaves that toppled orbital fleets, fractured planetary crusts, and distorted the very fabric of the warp. Every blow they exchanged was not merely physical. It resonated through space, bending reality around them, a cosmic storm of rage and lethal intent. In the midst of the battle, both forces instinctively adapted to each other's style. Hulk's raw, unstoppable power was tempered by Wolverine's agility and cunning, while Wolverine's strikes were measured and lethal, but constantly adjusted to counter Hulk's immense strength. For the first time, their duel became a true dance of titans, unstoppable force meeting unyielding will in a battle whose scale defied comprehension. The Imperium's commanders could do nothing but observe in awe and terror. Psychers screamed as warp fluctuations spiked, fleets trembled as orbital defenses failed, and regiments of Space Marines were annihilated before they could even engage. Chaos, too, recoiled, their demonic armies destroyed or scattered, their sorcerers impotent in the face of raw, uncontained power. For all its history, the galaxy had never seen a conflict like this, and perhaps it never would again. As the fight raged, subtle shifts occurred. Hulk's fury, though boundless, began to recognize the precision of Wolverine's attacks. Wolverine, though relentless, started to anticipate Hulk's massive swings, moving with even greater preternatural skill. In the heat of combat, a silent understanding seemed to emerge. Neither could fully dominate the other, yet both were stronger in tandem against the cosmic forces arrayed around them. This awareness, however, did not halt the violence, it merely amplified it. Entire planets were casualties of the ongoing conflict. Surface crusts split, oceans boiled away, cities were obliterated, and atmospheres ignited from the sheer force of their blows. The universe seemed to tremble under their power, every system within light, years of the combat zones feeling the aftershocks. Even the warp reacted violently, surging and thrashing as though it were a living entity attempting to contain or repel the anomalies. Yet, amidst the cataclysm, Hulk and Wolverine remained resolute. Neither yielded, neither faltered, and neither slowed. They were forces beyond comparison, embodiments of instinct and precision, fury and calculation. Their clash was not merely a battle, it was a reshaping of reality, a testament to forces beyond mortal understanding, a warning to the galaxy that some powers were too great, too alien, and too uncontainable to ever be controlled. As the penultimate stage of their confrontation drew on, the galaxy held its breath. The Imperium's fleets, scattered and battered, prepared contingency plans. Chaos forces, retreating to regroup, whispered darkly of revenge. And in the void between worlds, two beings continued their battle. Hulk, a mountain of rage and raw power; Wolverine, a predator of unmatched precision and unyielding will. The question now loomed larger than ever. When these titanic forces finally reach their limits, what remains of the galaxy? How many worlds will burn? How many armies will fall? And what will survive when rage meets claw in a conflict beyond comprehension? The answer remained unwritten, but one truth was undeniable. The universe had changed forever.